Okay, I am back, and on my phone, which I'm using for my camera, it's showing it's working perfectly, but I don't know why. Oh, the joys of Facebook and technology. Okay, I think that I have remedied the problem, but I'm going to my monitor now. There we go. Oh my goodness. Okay. Post in the comments if it's looking good. I think that we're back on track. I thought I had my process so slick this time with the music and everything. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, kids, if you're watching. And if you're watching this later, that is no problem. I really want to get up close on this book because that's really what it's about. Today we're going to be looking at Harold and the Purple Crayon by Crockett Johnson. So kids, first I'd just like to talk about Crockett Johnson a little bit. Did you know that Crockett Johnson wasn't his real name? Like so many authors, like Dr. Seuss's real name is Theodore Geisel, he used what's called a pen name. And pen because he's an author. His real name was David Johnson Leask, and he was born in 1906. Isn't that a long time ago? That's a long time ago. But his last name was spelled Leisk, and he thought people couldn't pronounce it. So he used to have a nickname when he was a child called Crockett. Now, I have no idea. In my research, I couldn't find out why he was called Crockett. Maybe he had one of those floofy hats and they called him Davy Crockett or something. I don't know. But that was his nickname, and then he kept his middle name, and he decided to use Crockett Johnson as his name. Okay? Kids, just look at this cover real quick and see, of course, this is Harold on the front and his purple crayon. It's pretty self-explanatory. Just kind of look at that. It's neat. Here's something interesting. Watch this. So this is a picture of Crockett Johnson. And like I said, he was born in 1906. And he not only wrote children's books, of which Harold and the Purple Crayon is the most famous, and then he went on to write 6 more Harold books, so there's 7. If you're ever at the library and you really like this book today, you can check out those other titles. They should all be there to get grouped together. I'm just going to leave him right here. So this is what he looks like. Now here's interesting. Look at Harold from the Purple Crayon. Look at Crockett Johnson. One of the other things Crockett Johnson did was write a comic strip. And this is a famous comic strip that appeared in newspapers all over the country. Now, kids, I know you might not even know what a newspaper is anymore. Maybe your grandpa reads one once in a while. I don't know. But back when we used to have paper newspapers, instead of looking at the news on iPads or computers, they would put comic strips in there. And a lot of times the kids and also many of the adults would like to look at those. They called them the funny pages too. Isn't that funny? So what's interesting is I want you to look at this. The main character of Barnaby, this is Barnaby. Look at him. Look at Harold. Look at Crockett. So I think you see the similarities there, kids. Right? He's bald, and he wrote his characters bald. That's kind of funny. And here's the other interesting thing. Here's a brief story of the Barnaby comic strip. Here he is in the first frame, and his mom is reading him a story talking about a fairy godmother. And Barnaby says, I don't suppose I've got a fairy godmother by any chance. And how the comic strip is set up is that late at night, a fairy wearing a hat and smoking a cigar that has wings shows up, and this turns out to be his fairy godfather called Jackeen. And they go on adventures. So I want you to think about that as we see how it relates to the story Harold and the Purple Crayon. The other thing Crockett did was do paintings. Isn't this very interesting? They called his paintings had to do with math and science and angles. Now, you may have started math in school and started out with adding or even learning what numbers are. But math can also be circles and triangles and angles and how things relate to each other and how the angles that they have. And so this is one of his famous paintings, and a lot of his paintings, if you look him up, have to do with circles and triangles and angles and such. They're very neat to look at. So those are the three things that Crockett Johnson is known for. So if you've got your book and you bought one or you have a copy at home and we're making our collection, I'd like you to go ahead with me, and either if you're good enough at writing, you go ahead and do this, or have your mom and dad do it. Let's write in our book again. Remember, we're just going to do the letters. Mr. Layne's Children's Book Club, number 2, and this is June 10th, 2020. And I'm just going to write my name in it. I hope you're enjoying making a collection of your own books, and even if you're watching this after the fact. All right, well, let's get started with this book. This is one of my favorites. I love it. And then we're going to kind of talk about it a little bit after. Harold and the Purple Crayon. One evening, after thinking it over for some time, Harold decided to go for a walk in the moonlight. There wasn't any moon, and Harold needed a moon for a walk in the moonlight. And he needed something to walk on. He made a long, straight path so he wouldn't get lost. And he set off on his walk, taking his big purple crayon with him. But he didn't seem to be getting anywhere on the long, straight path. So he left the path for a shortcut across a field, and the moon went with him. The shortcut led right to where Harold thought a forest ought to be. He didn't want to get lost in the woods, so he made a very small forest with just one tree in it. It turned out to be an apple tree. The apples would be very tasty, Harold thought, when they got red. So he put a frightening dragon under the tree to guard the apples. It was a terribly frightening dragon. It even frightened Harold. He backed away. His hand holding the purple crayon shook. What does it look like he's trying to draw here? Starting to draw. Suddenly he realized what was happening. But by then, Harold was over his head in an ocean. He came up thinking fast, and in no time he was climbing aboard a trim little boat. He quickly set sail, and the moon sailed along with him. After he had sailed long enough, Harold made land without much trouble. He stepped ashore on the beach, wondering where he was. The sandy beach reminded Harold of picnics, and the thought of picnics made him hungry. So he laid out a nice, simple picnic lunch. There was nothing but pie, but there were all 9 kinds of pie that Harold liked best. I don't even know if I could name 9 pies. Try it sometime. When Harold finished his picnic, there was quite a lot left. He hated to see so much delicious pie go to waste. So Harold left a very hungry moose and a deserving porcupine to finish it up. And off he went, looking for a hill to climb, to see where he was. Harold knew that the higher up he went, the farther he could see, so he decided to make the hill into a mountain. If he went high enough, he thought, he could see the window of his bedroom. He was tired and he felt he ought to be getting to bed. He hoped he could see his bedroom window from the top of the mountain. But as he looked down over the other side, he slipped, and there wasn't any other side of the mountain. He was falling in thin air. But luckily, he kept his wits and his purple crayon. He made a balloon and he grabbed onto it. And he made a basket under the balloon big enough to stand in. He had a fine view from the balloon, but he couldn't see his window. He couldn't even see a house. So he made a house with windows, and he landed the balloon on the grass in the front yard. None of the windows was his window. He tried to think where his window ought to be. He made some more windows. He made a big building full of windows. He made lots of buildings full of windows. He made a whole city full of windows. But none of the windows was his window. He couldn't think where it might be. He decided to ask a policeman. The policeman pointed the way Harold was going anyway, but Harold thanked him. And he walked along with the moon, wishing he was in his room and in bed. Then suddenly Harold remembered. He remembered where his bedroom window was when there was a moon. It was always right around the moon. And then Harold made his bed. He got in it, and he drew up the covers. The purple crayon dropped on the floor, and Harold dropped off to sleep. The end. Well, I hope you liked that. That's really such a fun book. And isn't it amazing? Do you see this? So there's only really 3 colors in this entire book. And the 3rd color is just the white pages. Then there's the black outline of Harold's figure and the words, and purple. It's amazing, isn't it, that something that simple can still be that fun. So kids, what I wanted to tell you about, just very briefly before we're done here, is that books oftentimes have what's called a theme. And that's either what the book's about or what the author is trying to get you to understand, even if it doesn't come right out and say it in the words. So if any kids are watching right now, and I guess you can always post after the fact as well, what do you think that Crockett Johnson was saying about Harold or about anyone reading his book? I'll just go right ahead with that. My idea is that it's about imagination and pretending. And that, in my opinion, even as I write books and I read books, and I hope you read lots of picture books too, is one of the most important things about children's books and picture books. It's nice to have a lesson to learn and things like that. But when you're young, I think it's important for you to use your mind and use your imagination to dream and to think of amazing things that may not even be real. And that helps you grow, and that helps you be creative, and it helps you to develop into who you are. So here's some questions if you're watching this later, or even now. You might want to think about these and talk to your moms or dads when you go to bed tonight, or even read the book again when you go to bed. So one thing I wanted to ask was, do you think Harold is really out on an adventure? Or do you think maybe he may be in his room the whole time? And then I wanted to ask, do you think it's a good thing to pretend? Or should you always think and do things that are 100% real all of the time? I kind of answered that earlier, but I want to know what you think. And then finally, what are the good things about imagining and pretending? I don't know if any of you have seen reruns because you're very young of the Mr. Rogers show. But one part of his show was always going to the land of make-believe. And there were puppets in there and all kinds of neat things. And so he very much thought pretending and imagination were very important. It helps your brain grow, and it helps you think about the world and your place in the world. And it's a pretty wonderful thing. So I hope you really enjoyed Harold and the Purple Crayon. Like I said, these aren't going to be very long. I want them to be about the book, and you can go back and watch these on YouTube. I'll post the link again on my Facebook page. And I hope you enjoyed it. Goodnight Moon is already on there. And then I want to announce that in 2 weeks, on June 24th at 3 p.m., same time, we're going to be reading Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak. That's an amazing classic picture book as well. So I hope you'll join me, and I hope you'll keep telling your family and friends, and that you will tune in again, or at the very least, watch this later on YouTube or on my Facebook page. I hope you all have an awesome Wednesday afternoon. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.